For probably the first time this summer, there's a real collective buzz around Arsenal, you feel. Expectations for the season suddenly feel more warranted. The adjustments in dynamics we've seen on pitch seem a bit more user-friendly. Our more left-field picks to bolster the attack now feel more secured, and our remaining need for one more attacker who could add some killer balls, some urgency, and some talent have been answered, it seems. And so, with David Ornstein finally dropping an Arsenal-related bomb, today's video is going to be all about Eberechi Eze to Arsenal. Eze the player, his tactical fit, and how he elevates the side himself. Welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once again. And for many Arsenal fans, there's a cultural fit that makes the Eze signing so undeniably right. The pinching off Spurs' toes, of course, makes it sweeter, and I share all that excitement. But let's go deeper and delve into the details of Eze's profile, starting with his skill set in transition, his glide that he has over bigger spaces, his ability to release runners. This is a very reductive shot of his deployment under Glasner for Crystal Palace, a free-roaming 10 who begins surprisingly high, does a lot of probing beyond, but mostly loves to drop, combine, drift and excite. Whether he is deployed further inside or closer to the touchline, you'll see him float behind or to the side of pressers like this in these left-hand side zones. From here, he'll receive off the back foot, and this is where we leave, I think, pure aesthetics, because he's got the ability here to carry up on the break. He sucks defenders in. Look at the fluency of his touches, also his balance, the ability to ride contact with a stockier lower body, and how easily he switches between feet when dribbling at high speeds. And this means all you can really do as a defender is simply backpedal. If you do dive in or leave yourself flat-footed, this is where, even though Eze is short of that blistering pace or top-end burst, he will leave you behind in that effortless fashion. Even better though, is if you can begin to surround him with these kinds of dynamics, off the left or further in field. He really starts running things here, with runners off the last line ahead of him, someone stretching wide, preferably a left footer to give him cutbacks and combinations. And if you can, and are built for it, like Crystal Palace are, you can have someone further right offering another option for him to find as well. Because Eze's passing, particularly his release of the ball in terms of the weight of pass, the different techniques he can use, the spray that he has that can open up different lanes, I think this is hardly spoken about as much as it should be, because ideally you don't want to overburden Eze in any one thing, because his brain and his inventiveness offer so many different solutions. I think to stay more specifically with his ability on fast breaks and after turnovers, transitions are not just about raw pace or big passes. There's a lot more subtlety required when the game is moving so quickly around you. For example, a key tenet, I think, in all of our summer signings is their ability to withstand long, intense runs and carries and maintain the presence of mind to get a good shot or a good pass off in the box. Equally, Eze slows the game down often in transition, or more accurately I think, commits defenders one way or the other to open up space elsewhere. He might be knocked off balance, but he rides the contact. The game might be going by at pace, but he always releases at the right time. This lack of indecision, this clarity, I think, is so important for upping our capacity on the break, maybe more than anything else. To bridge to my next point though, I mentioned this in my original scouting report on Eberechi Eze. The maturity to his game has been probably his best development for me. I love him because he balances, I think, has a really unique balance of wanting to make a defender look silly and express himself, but balancing that, marrying that with an efficiency. Watch his BBC interview if you want a greater sense of this. What about though when games get low, when blocks need to be broken, when tight spaces and small windows are all we've got to work with, especially in the centre of the pitch, and when there's a much higher load placed on 1v1s, for example, out on the touchline? If anything, I actually think in these situations sometimes Eze can be too cool, too comfortable when someone's up his back, jostling for possession. I've actually slightly cooled on how unstoppable he sometimes is in these really tight spaces. But that's actually because For me at least, he has a different type of game when he is high and central than the dribblers you typically want to associate him with. Take Ethan Nwaneri, someone who is really shifty in the pockets. Lots of little choppy steps, and with time, as he gets older, he will learn to slow himself down. At the moment though, it's go, go, go. With Eze, it's more about waiting for jumps, combining with others. There are plenty of deceptive movements, but there's also an ingenuity with flicks or first touches. He's really good and competent 1v1, but he doesn't eliminate defenders time and time again. He's a bit more willing to feel contact than instantly wriggle out of it. He's a lot more open to being a bit of a backboard himself, laying off other attackers like we've seen with Mateta, maybe bouncing it with Zubimendi, for example, when the Spaniard jumps high. Being a bit more selfless, I think, in the final third is something that isn't normally recognised with Eze's game, but is prevalent. This also circles around to that maturity I was talking about, because when the game is lower, there isn't as much space for Eze to glide into, so his direct duels versus defenders are still super effective, still full of tricks, but it's more about gaining a yard here and there. I used this example as well in my first scouted. This is a feature of Eze's dribbling. He leaves himself open. It's a hard sell. As a defender, you'll find it hard to usher him down the line. He's really intention neutral, for example. This is part of the reason why, as long as he has support, I don't think we need to completely rip up our current left-hand side dynamics to make him a real hit out wide, even if it's not your first choice for him personally. How could I not talk about goals, though, about shots? Another statistical feature of our window is the shot volume of all our attacking signings. It's hard to get too blasé when Eze has made a habit of hitting these types of efforts from just outside the box, or consistently hits the ball so cleanly first time, whether that's arriving in the box from left centre mid or left wing zones, or he has that aforementioned conviction at the end of a barnstorming run or carry. Again, he only needs 1 yard. Look how neutral he keeps his intentions here, and how open he keeps the pocket before his strike on goal here. He almost baits Lukic further away from the middle before ducking and driving and ripping one into the corner. Now, this is important to add. Eze's probably in the class of about 2 or 3 players I've seen make Declan Rice, yes, Declan Rice, hesitant in the tackle, or slightly rein in the jumps and the aggression. That's definitely instructive. Before we move on to the tactical side of things, though, I want to cover Eze off the ball. I don't want to glance past that. And partly through Glasner's system, but also down to Eze being a bit more selfless, a bit more mature. He's equipped himself, I think, with the more in-behind, oftentimes goal-getty, stretchy runs off the shoulder. He does this more than he probably should because of Palace's system, and you don't want to keep him really wide doing this in an Arsenal shirt. But as long as you have your real sprinters in Martinelli and Madueke, and your immediate goal-hungry guys in Gyökeres, Eze feels a really nice add to this bunch. Defensively, I have little worries as well. Palace are more about blocking and funneling balls inside their block and inside their zone to collapse on in their press, but application and durability wise, the ability to get himself in between ball and man, I don't have any real concerns about Eze. I'd probably look, yes, for a late game sub for Martinelli if things really need to be shored up, with Martinelli's fresh legs essentially doing those shuttles up and down the pitch. But that's more proof of what a great squad and great squad depth can do, as opposed to any shortcomings on Eze's part. Are there any shortcomings to Eze's game, though? That's the question I want to look at before we look at his fit tactically in this Arsenal side. If this even constitutes a criticism, I've mentioned him maybe being great instead of unstoppable in tight spaces, but I think his shooting needs a little more qualification as well, because having Rice and Eze hanging around these softer zones when we push a line much deeper or cut balls back to them is probably good, yes, for another 5 goals a season, but Eze himself can take rather audacious attempts on goal, let's say, and although I think there's a lot of scope for development here, he doesn't always score as much as he really should with his left foot, because he can shift the ball quickly, chop back deceptively and strike it pure, but he doesn't look for it enough for me. I think Eze falls into that category many of our targets fall into, that aren't a Bradley Barcola, for example. So clearly talented, so clearly an upgrade, but occupying in between places in the squad. If he had unstoppable, searing speed, he'd be a £100 million player. £68 million is not nothing as it is, and there is a risk of not being able to recoup loads of that in a sale down the line. But my counter argument to that would be, if he crystallises that transition for Max and Ethan in the squad, that's even more valuable. He's not been free from his share of injuries either. And then in terms of the squad building, is he someone you rip up your current shapes for, or do you just allow him to plug and play anywhere he sees fit across the attack? These are the questions I think you have with the Eze signing. You can see how very few of these come in the way of pure talent. So it's time to look at Arsenal tactically with the inclusion of Eberechi Eze. And if I'm honest, I am still just as excited. Let's start by looking at how he'd shape up as a left winger. As I said, I don't think any ripping up has to be done, especially in light of our emphasis on tempo, our willingness to release the ball and also to lose the ball more in favour of a more high tariff pass or action that we've seen through pre-season and against United. Calafiori is his best partner in terms of dynamics from left back, because this duo would be full of purpose, infectiousness, weirdness and intelligence. We know Calafiori is not a pure overlapper, he's a free roamer. He loves to push up as an outball, high and wide, which would push Eze infield into those interesting places he likes to receive, with Eze's comfort as well, attracting multiple markers, that contact comfort, even though you don't have maybe a Madueke type, a left footer stretching down the line again and again. Eze's gravity opens up so much space for Calafiori to go exploring into. Eze's passing bag is the best of all of our left wing options, and those deliberate commits that he makes defenders do before releasing Calafiori beyond seems a really nice option. In the final third, they'll also both just swirl, they'll combine, they'll use their left and right feet, mix passing with searching runs, unpredictability with a real game awareness. I think Wharton for Crystal Palace was always looking for Eze, and with Zubimendi, although he's not left-footed, he's super comfortable using his so-called weaker foot, and I think he would be just as happy to do that. You'll also be beginning, I think, to see how Eze and Gyökeres will naturally gravitate towards each other. And as I've analysed, there has been a marked increase in our intentions to release runners, to play at speed, but often, so far in pre-season and against United, it's been the weight, the timing, the connections that have been off. With Eze, that's simply not the case. I can see less and less of our transitions running out of momentum or being channeled away from goal. More carries to build up speed for Madueke and Gyökeres, more high touches for Saka, less burden on Odegaard, more freeing up of Rice, etc. Because Eze is absolutely a pure upgrade in terms of that lock picking we were looking for on the touchline anyway, but I still wouldn't want to begin to try and excuse a left-hand side where it's Myles staying pretty fixed and deep alongside Zubimendi, Rice is being a bit too much pinning for my liking and stretching in beyond, and Eze will make good use of that depth that Rice creates. Myles will punch balls through to him, but I want to maximise what we have, of course, and lots of this is similar for a left centre mid role at Arsenal, with the idea of more of a Rice and Zubimendi pivot, constantly shifting sides and heights. There is certainly the prospect of looking at Eze in a freer, floaty, more central role, but I'm looking from the perspective of Mikel and wanting to get Odegaard in the team, looking to break down some of the game states that we haven't been able to outfox in recent times, deploying both Eze and Odegaard. I don't think is as far-fetched as some people have suggested. This seems more situational when we're chasing a game. Of course, there's also the out of possession question, but the off-ball dynamics such as this, with the closest 8 to the ball joining the centre forward and the other dropping next to Rice, who is closer to the centre, jumping either side, is something Mikel has already used as a manager, this 4-1-4-1 block to move and jump out of. Look, the whole summer, I and many of you have been craving another attacker to share some creative responsibility, preferably through the left, more of a maverick who is full of ideas, shots and purpose against stubborn physical defences, especially affecting the game closer to the middle, someone who gives us a conviction and ups our tolerance to play in transition. It's difficult and it's almost impossible to find the perfect player. We don't have a Declan Rice for a Declan Rice-sized hole anymore. Every option has their hitches, their squad-building dominoes, the tweaks that need to accommodate them, but talent finds a way of affecting things no matter what, and that feels like Eberechi Eze. Does it guarantee success? No. It doesn't. But I do feel so much more confident going into the season. I feel expectations that have rightly been put on our shoulders have a much better chance of being met. There are always going to be uncertainties and question marks. Things will crop up that we haven't have envisioned, but I feel we are much better prepared for that this time around. We haven't rested on our laurels. We've gone out and we've got Eberechi Eze, and we're a better team for it. Sometimes, details aside, it's really just that simple. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.